Ani Kinawea, Sabadish Indigenous Cause, Wahnapitae I'm Jonathan Tulloch, and welcome to Ben Studios, home of Area 57. And tonight we have a wonderful opportunity to meet and listen and speak and listen with Chief Delbert as he takes us through his book, some of the time, his thoughts on the last president. We're very honored that you could be here today.
Mm-hmm.
And for the ones, again, that could make it, miigwech. And for any ones who are on their way, welcome. Chief?
Okay, I'd like to thank the people here, and especially yourself, for inviting me, and I hope I can teach you a little bit about the world we live in, and I want to go a little further than that. I want to teach you the truth about it, because what we've all had to live through has been it's been rather, I'd say, tough, and for some of us tougher than that. For myself, I'm just going to start off with going through a couple of things. I'll start off with the book, but I also want to stress section 35 and 25 and give you an interpretation update of what that means, and I'll tie in with some of the history about your area, your people, and I'm also a historian, besides being an expert on Aboriginal treaty rights. Okay, I'm going to start off with a little bit about the book, because it actually leads into the talk on the constitutional sections that I was fortunate to be around at the time, and as national leader, I ensured that what was put in there was the strongest possible language ever, and all the wording in there is done by our people, so and the elders from across the country. So we made it so strong that you can't really get around it, and the next thing I've got to do with it is I want to stop these judges from interpreting things where they have no knowledge and no ability, and that violates Section 25 of the Constitution Act, which, if you read between the lines, it says only our people can determine what the powers and the various aspects of our nationhood were, which are constitutionally protected today, so that as a nation, we also had the rights to make our own laws, our own economy, our way of living, and but the wording in that reflects the attempt to eventually move everything towards that direction. And I think probably today is it's finally happening. It's really finally happening. But in any event, let me get back to the book. The book was written by my son and I. No ghostwriters in it, and I'm really proud of that. A lot of the other Indian books, they had ghostwriters, so you'll find this one extremely interesting, because it won't be boring any place in it. But I wanted to start out with my experience in the residential school, and here's one aspect of the book that I was probably the only. I think I was the only one in Canada to actually take the government to court over residential school. everybody else settled. And then when they finally were forced to go to court, they settled with me, and I just had no conditions. So, which allowed me to write all about the experience in residential school. And well, I probably made it as graphic as I possibly could, but without, really being offensive as well. So that's what I try to do. But I think people get the feeling in there of what the kids went through, and how tough it was, and actually to survive the school was one thing, but then most of the kids really had no future once they got out, and I think a lot of them were gone by between 30 and 40, and drank themselves to death and whatnot. But anyway, it was this kind of thing that I think that it helped me, because at 13 I was out in the street on my own, and I had to make decisions. So I did, and I decided one very important thing. So I'm not going to get mad at the world for what's happened to me. Instead, I'm going to put a smile on my face and see where that takes me, what I'm going to get educated. So I did. And I was able to work my way through high school. I always had jobs because I could go out and hustle. And so I always had to work. And if you, of course, part of the book is you'll see me in there. 14 years old, I bought my first car and drove it to Niagara Falls. I know it, but what the heck, I'm my own boss. And you got to learn things. So, hey, I eventually learned, but I did. I made it through school, university, and I actually I went to work in the States for a number of years as a machinist, and somebody talked me into coming back. An uncle talked me into coming back, and so I went to university, and then I got into land claims, and I think I estimate I helped settle about 60 of them, so including 3 for my own community, and that kind of prepared me, I guess, for the next phase, which was politics. From being a technical person, doing this kind of work, and having lawyers work for me at that time. And I never did trust lawyers back then. I made sure that the decisions that were made on the land claims were mine and not theirs. So but I was that kind of person. But I got a lot done, and besides even setting up a system whereby you could get your land claims resolved. Of course, they haven't improved it much more than was then, but there's still a chance you can get them resolved. So. But in any event, then they put me in politics. So I spent a couple of terms. I brought the Union of Ontario Indians up to par. It was a mess when I took over. And then I did a couple of terms there, and there was a lot of discussion about the Constitution at the time. Trudeau was in there, and I'd always been searching for something that would help our people get protection for Aboriginal treaty their rights, because I was sick of going to court and watching judges convict them of hunting and fishing, and fining them, and getting some of them pretty heavy fines. So, well, Jesus, what is it we need? So I did a lot of research, and finally come up with what I thought was the best option. That was getting it put in the Constitution, the highest law of the land, and getting the wording in there so tough that they couldn't get around it. And so I ran for the national leadership in order to get that in. And it wasn't really, I was trying to find a better leader someplace in Canada, but I couldn't, you know, and nobody would really want it. Well, I said, well, if you people don't want to run, then support me. I says, I'll put us in the Constitution. And as things would have it, and a lot of hard work, a lot of lobbying, a lot of working till midnight, a lot of nights, from 7 in the morning. So usually 7 in the morning, I usually had to do the TV shows, you know, or the things like that, and just sort of discuss. I never really prepared anything for them because, you know, you never know what kind of questions they were going to ask you anyway. But so the discussions came about, and I did all that lobbying, but I had a lot of help from all over Canada. Our people came through. They did everything they possibly could, and we actually had 3 organizations supporting it. Although we did all the work, all the writing was done by the National Indian Brotherhood. The other organizations didn't really have too much of a clue of rights or anything of that sort. And the Métis had none at all. So, but they were supporting us, and they were an organization there. So finally, I really wanted to make sure I could get it in. So I opened an office in England, and I lobbied around the world. And a friend of mine said he was checking some things there, and then one of the papers reported that's what I was doing, you know. But when I come back to Canada, Chrétien pulls me aside. I was in a committee room, and pulls me aside. He says, "Mr. Riley," he says, "if you will close your office in England, we will give you your protection for Aboriginal treaty rights." And that's how it got in. So I shook his hand, and in my mind, that's when the honor of the crown began, and for that phase. And yeah, yeah, and so it's you know, it's been a while. I think I was probably the last national leaders that actually went after or fought for our rights. I was always fighting for them. But the Liberal Party kind of took over the organization after that, and because a lot of the Crees from out west were Liberals, and so they took over, and of course they haven't done anything. I think I was just glad I was there, and maybe it was the Great Spirit that decided that this should happen, and it did, and I was happy. I pushed hard, and I think we've won something like 350 cases in a row on Section 35 now. So it's there, and it's there for our use. Okay, a problem we have though today is our chiefs and councils are part of the government structure. They're set up under the Indian Act, and their total authority lies within that act, all of the wording in it, which in the end, if they wanted to make any laws, they've only got two places they can do it on. So beekeeping and noxious weeds. Yeah. Other than that, they got nothing. Yeah. And here's a situation just to show you how crazy the Indian Act is. Down our community, they council try to throw out one of the councillors and try to get them charged. Well, the councillor come to me one day and said, "Hey, I got to go to court tomorrow. Can you come and defend me?" And I said, "Well, okay. Well, give me the background." So I got all the background that night, and went into court, and of course I could get away with a little more, for the judge. So I said, yeah, I've done the research. I understand fully what this case is all about, and here are the facts. So I went through it, and finally the judge broke for dinner, and so I went out. I had lunch with them. This lady also had 5 witnesses against her, and after I come back from lunch, the judge looks. He looks at. He says, "You won't need Mr. Riley in here anymore. I'm sure he's pretty busy. You can send him on." And he said, "Case dismissed." So anyway, here's the important part of it. They try to throw her off counsel, but instead the lady went before another judge, and they said, well, unfortunately, the Indian Act doesn't contain any kind of provision where you can a council can throw anybody out. But we've run into that situation several places, where they, and unfortunately, they operate on this sort of a pseudo authority that they don't even know what it is, but they try to pass it on that they do, and they don't. So they essentially don't have any authority. They are essentially operating ghetto programs for the government, and even the government never tells them the truth. It never tells them that, hey, you can't get any place like this because we have authority over the council. You have to get approval of the minister. But the other important thing, the reason I told you, the other important thing is that Section 35 does not include the John A. Macdonald chiefs and councils, because they never made any treaties. I made sure that it stuck with the original clans and people who made the treaties, or the rights always stayed with the traditional people. So that's where that stands, and essentially means that they can't deal in any lands or rights, and so they're left with a fiduciary obligation that's imposed on them through the Indian Act, because the minister has a fiduciary, and they do tasks for them, on lands and that. So they have a fiduciary as well, and you can sue them. They can sue and be sued. So they're not an Indian. They're a corporation. See, but the government never tells them this stuff, and so where are you going to get the direction to develop your economy the way you want, the kind of direction you want? Somehow, we're going to have to get back to a situation where our people can make those decisions again through whatever system you develop. And I always liked the old clan system because it involved everybody, and everybody was proud of their role that they had in that nation. Whereas the elective system put 51% running the 49%. And it just divided every community there. So you got people hating each other, and what for? To be on a chief and council that has no authority, except to manage a little pot of money, and and the government don't care. They want to make sure is that, hey, we want to keep the Indian Act so we can still have easy access to their resources, and we can have a council that can give away their land on them.
Be deciders.
Yep.
Of things.
Yeah. But it's not their fault. It's what the government concocted through its BNA Act, and which actually they never had the right to do, because I tell people now, hey, Canada was never a full country. When the Indian Act was made, they were just a part of England. They're a colony. So colonists developed, well, actually, there was some Englishmen in England that developed the Indian Act for them, but they used it. They used it, and in my mind, 9124 of the BNA Act is really a stretch of the imagination to say that that gives them the right to make racial laws against us. That's nonsense. It's a trust section. It means they have a trust, and that's all. So, right now, I know I know what Trudeau went through. His biggest problem, why he couldn't get rid of rights, was because he knew they were just a colony. They never had the right to do that. So what do we do about it? So we got to let them know. And so that's the aspects of Section 35, and some aspects of how it relates to current chiefs and councils and the traditional people. But that was the way it went into the Constitution. I made sure that was the way it would stay, because I also knew that we were going to have a lot of growth problems in the future unless it was done right. So it doesn't mean we're out of the woodwork. We got a huge racial problem ahead of us in the future, and I think the quest or the problem is how are we going to deal with that, and what are we going to do about it? But I think there's a lot of options you have. You know, once the knowledge becomes known, it's going to help you with your land claims, with your understanding of what your rights are here. All your treaty area was never bought from you. Your rights are totally intact there, and that means your minerals, your everything on the ground, it's totally yours. And your original Robinson-Huron Treaty, I don't know if, in my mind, it appears to be invalid because they never completed the process of getting the people to agree. You know, they capture a few chiefs and made them forced to sign because they were in jail, but it's probably left you with a great opportunity. You know, in spite of all those terrible things that happened to them, you know, at that treaty making time. But there's one other, I think, a very important thing to mention. It's also connected with the Constitution, and that's the Rowan Proclamation. Now, the Rowan Proclamation, well, of course, it directly affects you because it's a royal proclamation as well. But Rowan, he was trying to fix up all the problems with the Robinson-Huron, and so he made it a royal proclamation. But he also recognized some parts of the old Indian Protection Act, it was called, made in 1850. And the context of that kind of law at that time is different, because in fact it was used to protect us from white encroachment, and it wasn't like the Indian Act, which purports to control everything about us. Instead, it also detailed a lot of the aspects of what your Aboriginal rights were. And you can't take that away, because even the Royal Proclamation is recognition of your rights. It can't make any, and although the governments are trying to, a lot of times they try to interpret the treaties as not having this right, not having that right, but you have it all in Section 35, and it's just that a lot of places you have to gather together. What does it really mean? I think I could probably do maybe about 3/4 of it right now, and the rest I'd have to do a little more research. But I could tell you what your rights are, and they're the same as what's in the Mi'kmaq treaties, because we all were the same. And mineral rights, they would say, hey, yeah, well, we have those too, you know. And so this is just an example of why your rights would come from all over the place. And you've automatically got your sovereignty from the 1764. Well, it was an arrangement, and that they needed our help in the War of 1812, the 60-year war, as it's called, from 1850 on. We were all constantly fighting, and especially my people in the south along the border. We did hundreds of raids into the states, and I think we even sent 124 warriors with Chief Pontiac, you know. And but the most powerful thing of our people, the Ojibwe people, was that we all fought together. People from the north came down in droves to help out. So Shingwak was there, you know, and all the chiefs from around here, and so we beat the Americans. We never lost a war. That is so important, because no, they can't say they took it by force on you. So, okay, it just puts you up another level. But all of these things our people need to know, and even our, you know, current Indian Act chiefs and council need to know the truth. And all I do is I just tell the truth. And people ask me, aren't you sometimes scared when you go out and talk to them? I'm not afraid to tell the truth. Hi everyone, my name is Del Riley. I'm former president of the National Indian Brotherhood. I was involved as the national president. It was my position that we needed protection in Canada's highest law, the Constitution. I then proceeded to implement it and get them put in the Constitution, which after a long, hard fight, we finally got some of the sections in. The two important ones were Section 25 and 35. This book contains how this all came about, 8 years of TB in residential schools. I had to go back and relive some of the horror of residential schools. I'd like to dedicate this book to all of the survivors out there. Purchase this book below.